Midweek, hello and welcome to Business Life. Coming up tonight, we assess the impact of inflation on the cost of borrowing for businesses as March 2024 inflation increases sharply to 25.8%.
This indicates that we have seen a surge in the rate of inflation by 2.6 percentage points, increasing from 23.2% to 25.8% for the month of March 2024.
We will hear from the business community shortly. Also in this bulletin, cash reserve ratio increase impacting positively on cedi performances as rates of depreciation against dollar slow significantly for second week running. We are live with a finance lecturer on that. Plus today on the Joy Business van, we will tell you how startup Gold Coast Tokuta is promoting Ahima, the traditional slippers worn by royals. We have details of these and many others arranged for you. Please stay. Grateful for your company. I am Pius Kojobaka. To our very first story we have for you, inflation for the month of March 2024 has seen a sharp increase to 25.8% from 23.2% recorded in February 2024. Now, inflation for both locally produced items and imported items went up substantially to 26.6% and 23.8% respectively. According to the Ghana Statistical Service, food, non-alcoholic beverages and transport were contributors for the rate of inflation. Here's a report.
According to figures from the Ghana Statistical Service, the non-food inflation went up by 22.6%, while food inflation increased to 29.6%. Locally produced items and imported items went up by 26.6% and 23.8% respectively. Food and non-alcoholic beverages as well as transport were identified as the contributors for the increase in the overall inflation for March 2024. Speaking to journalists at a press briefing, government statistician Professor Samuel Kobnenim said the increase shows a surge of 2.6 percentage points.
In the month of March 2024, rate of inflation stood at 25.8% year-on-year inflation relative to 23.2% recorded for the month of February 2024. This indicates that we have seen a surge in the rate of inflation by 2.6 percentage points, increasing from 23.2% to 25.8% for the month of March 2024. Disaggregating this from a food and a non-food perspective, rate of inflation for food was 29.6% relative to non-food 22.6%. Both food and non-food inflation have seen a 2.6 percentage increase in its rate of inflation between February and March 2024.
Meanwhile, Upper East was the region with the highest inflation of 42.9%, while
Let's bring in the thoughts of the business community, and we've joined via Zoom by the Association of Ghana Industries. It's Greater Accra Regional Chairman Apelu joins us with some analysis on that. Thanks so much, Shanam, for your time. Now, I want to know your initial thoughts about the rate of inflation. We are learning some 25.8% from the 23.2% recorded in February. Are you surprised?
Well, thank you, Pius. Good evening and good evening to your cherished listeners. So I'd like to begin by saying that we are not surprised at all about this, because if you observe, for a couple of days now, the cedi has been depreciating significantly against major currencies like the dollar. And most of our raw materials we use in the production process, we do import them. What it means is that as the cedi depreciates, the cost of raw material goes up for that matter, and that affects the entire cost of production. So you observe that in the report, the locally manufactured goods, inflation actually goes, it is really high because the cost of raw materials are high. And we feel that the rate at which the cedi is depreciating, it will continue to impact on the inflation rate significantly. It's also important to mention that the cost of fuel would also partly explain this inflationary situation we are dealing with. you'd observe that we move the goods from the farm gates, most of the raw materials from the farm gates to industrial centers. And we have to transport these raw materials. What it means is that as the fuel price goes up, the overall cost of transportation goes up, and that affects the cost of production as well. And so overall, the rate at which we sell our products in the market increase as a result.
And so, all right, go ahead, conclude.
No, so I'm saying that we need to take urgent steps to tackle the issue of the fuel as well as the depreciation of the cedi.
And as we speak, Chonam, we are still grappling with cedi depreciation, as you've rightly articulated, and of course, power crisis, fuel price hikes, and transport fares, which of course we are getting signals that is likely to go up, meaning we should expect further hikes in the coming months as a result of that development when it comes to inflation. But how does this come to you that these developments may have an impact on inflation going forward?
So, sorry, say the last thing again, sorry. I'm
asking that looking at this current development we are witnessing when you talk about fuel price hikes and of course the cedi depreciation, what have you, there are projections that if measures are not taken to address these concerns, that may have a major impact on inflation going forward. And I'm asking that as a business community, how do you think this?
Yes, so unfortunately what you're saying is accurate because the two major things, the cost of the fuel, you see that because of the intermittent cut of power, we have to resort to the use of gensets. And so we would rather prefer to just fuel the gensets and use it over time because of the consistency that we require for the flow of power. And so as the cost of fuel goes up, it affects our production in a big way. And also the depreciation of the cedi. And all of these also now affect the rates at which we borrow from the banks, because the central bank would essentially increase the primary rates once inflation goes up. And so it distorts the entire private sector operations. So our position is that urgent steps must be taken to tackle the depreciation of the cedi, and also that the increasing cost of fuel must also be looked at. We need a more stabilized environment to be able to operate. We believe that it is only when the cedi is stabilized and also that the fuel prices are minimized that we can achieve a sort of stability even for the inflation rate.
And Chonam, give me a first sense of how you intend to cope in the coming months when it comes to cost of borrowing, as the Bank of Ghana is likely to tighten its monetary policy stance as a way of controlling inflation.
Yeah, well, the last time we met the management of the central bank with the governor and his team, we did indicate to them that it will mean so much to industry if they do not just increase the price of the policy rate because inflation rate has gone up. We fully understand that they are using inflation targeting model in fixing their policy rate, but it affects industry in a big way. And we feel that we cannot merely have a situation where anytime there's increase in inflation rate, the policy rate goes up, it affects us. So we're asking the central bank this time around to consider not to hasten slowly in wanting to increase the policy rate. And all of us must come in to really make the call that the policy rate needs to be stabilized, as well as ensuring that inflation rate, every measure is taken to tackle the increase in inflation rate.
Greater Accra Regional Chairman of the Association of Ghana Industries, Chonam Afelu, we are grateful for your time. A while longer on this, and economist and research lead at GCB Capital Courage Boutique is projecting a decline in inflation for the month of April. According to him, although the country is grappling with the cedi depreciation, power crisis, fuel price hikes, amongst others, he believes the base drift effect will continue in a favorable direction.
Inflation is calculated, changes in the CPI from a certain base period to the current period that lower base from March 2023 will mean that inflation will increase for the period. Add that to the fact that we've seen some cedi depreciation within the data window, and we've seen also fuel prices surge at the pumps within the period, which is reflected in transport inflation for a period. It is not a surprise at all that it's crept to the level we are seeing it now.
Courage, we are currently experiencing a power crisis. Fuel prices are going up. We expect transfer fares to go up in the coming days. Also, we are also having to deal still with currency depreciation. Looks like inflation is going to continue to rise in the coming months. Is that your analysis?
Well, so those are risks to the outlook, which we must acknowledge will be the case. If you realize all the factors you mentioned do not only have their direct effect, they also have their second round effect. For instance, transport fares. We've already seen not increases in transport fares per se, but we've seen transport inflation go up, and it's reflected in the fuel people are purchasing and all that. GPRTU, I believe, will respond soon with some increments that they are touting. Those would have both direct and indirect impact. It would affect the general pricing of goods and services on the market. cedi depreciation, yes, I think there is returning some sense of stability within the last week or so, and in this week we are in now, partly due to the inflow from the World Bank and maybe the other factors that may support the outlook going forward. And of course, the Monetary Policy Authority stance on inflation and cash reserve ratio may also play a role in supporting the inflation out, in fact, currency outlook maybe going forward. So there are risks which will pose threats to the outlook going forward, but there is also the pull factor or the support factor. Generally, the base drift will continue, this time in a favorable way. And so the expectation is that these pressures we're seeing now will moderate any anticipated decline in inflation. So there could be decline from April going forward. From the simulation I'm doing, we could begin to see some declines from April, but not as much as would have been. But for the
away from inflation and its related stories, the increase in cash reserve ratio for commercial banks is impacting positively on the cedi's performance. That's the view of some banks that Joy Business has been engaging. George Biafe has the rest of the story.
Local currency's rate of depreciation has slowed significantly against the US dollar. For the second week running, the cedi has not been recording those significant drop in value as witnessed in the first 3 months of this year. The situation has improved further since last week. Some of these currency dealers have told Joy Business that the increase in the cash reserve ratio is forcing some of the commercial banks to liquidate their holdings in foreign currencies to support their cedi reserves that should be held at the Bank of Ghana. Some of the commercial banks were even quoting 13 Ghana cedis, 55 pesos to a dollar for their interbank transactions on Monday. Others say there's also been improved liquidity on the market in terms of dollar support from the Bank of Ghana. And all these things are feeding into the cedi's performance over the past 2 weeks. Joy Business is learning that demand for dollars by businesses to finance their imports are also reducing, and that could be another reason for the local currency's performance against the US dollar.
Joining us for some quick analysis on this is a senior finance lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Benjamin Amoah. Thanks so much, Dr. Amoah, for your time. Now, based on this development, can we say that these fresh policy measures by the Bank of Ghana are not bad at all, really, despite some industry concerns?
Good evening to your viewers. It depends on who is looking at it and whose interest is at play here. For the central bank, clearly you can see that this particular directive is an intermediation management behavior approach, where the central bank has carefully monitored the banks. And I've realized that some banks are not lending. And because some of the banks are not lending, the central bank has come with this tiered cash reserve ratio approach to force the banks to lend. So if you are making up to about 55 of your deposits in the form of loans, you keep 15%. Anything between 40, 55 is 25. And then anything below 40 of your deposit as loans, you keep 25. So clearly you can see that this particular regime is aimed at forcing the commercial banks to give out loans, because if you do not give out the loans, it's going to cost you more to hold the deposit. So that is from the regulator's point of view. Now, if you are a depositor, what does it mean for you? For you, the depositor, what it means is that a chunk of your deposit is going straight to the central bank. In case of any difficulty with the bank, that particular percentage is secured to the central bank. But that also means cost to the bank, because the bank will have loved to trade or to work with your funds. But because the banks are not giving out the loans, the central bank says, hold on, send that percentage of funds to the central bank. So if you're a depositor, it is good. If you're a borrower, the bank will be forced by this directive to give out loans. So we are expecting that with this particular directive, businesses that have been requesting for loans and have good case on hand will likely get the credit facility, because this time around, the banks either give you the loan or a good percentage is sent to the central bank as reserves. So if you look at the bank themselves, the banks will now have a lot to pay for if they refuse to give out credit and they want to trade with the money. Why? Because a higher percentage will have to be kept to the central bank. So for the banks, it's expensive now not to give out loans. If you look at it from this perspective, then you can appreciate what the policy means and what it means for the players within this particular industry.
All right, then I guess I wouldn't be wrong to say that at least that market is responding positively to this cash reserve issue. But should this thing be seen as a temporary measure?
Yes, temporary, because I believe the central bank will be looking at the numbers. They'll be looking at how the banks are responding to this particular directive. Clearly, it will be difficult as we speak now for the banks to, and the banks will have to be careful. Why? Because, for you to create a loan, you must look at the business case, you must look at the possibility of the loan being repaid, and you must look at the risk associated with the loan. So the fact that this directive is coming from the central bank does not mean that you must go quickly to your loan book and then start dishing out loans. You have to be careful, because giving out the loans in this particular regime is quite risky. So I'm foreseeing that the banks will, in the interim, rather gamble by holding on to the cash for the central bank to get the cash reserve ratio, because that is safe for the banks, than to risk it by just going out to give out loans. When it is the case that the loans may not be good loans in terms of the issues surrounding the loans. So the banks will be careful. In the interim, the banks will prefer to rather have the funds moving to the central bank. As the cases come for loan requests and the loans are genuine and good loans, then the banks going forward will be giving out the loans. If you ask me from the credit management point of view, it will be in the interest of the banks to rather let the central bank have the money in terms of the cash reserve ratio than to quickly start giving out loans, which may be risky.
On the flip side, the Bank of Ghana wants the banks to respond accordingly to this cash reserve ratio by lending to businesses. And I'm asking whether this is feasible, looking at where inflation is now.
The decision to lend or not to lend, in as much as the cash reserve ratio can influence it, also needs a lot of things to be considered. The business environment itself may be causing the banks to have this particular behavior of posture. For a policy like this, one would have expected the central bank to have announced this maybe 3 months ahead, that this is what we have in mind going forward. If you are a bank and you are not able to meet this particular threshold by way of intermediation, this is how much you are going to be forced to keep at cash reserve ratio. So that the banks will know, so that the business community will also know. Ministry of Finance will be aware. Ministry of Trade and Industry will be aware. We are talking about the bank themselves, Association of Ghana Industry, because you see, you want the loans to be given out and the loans to be good loans. If you come out and it appears that this is coming all of a sudden, then it's a shock to the market and the banks will have to respond. One would have expected some form of, prior notice to the banks.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Benjamin Amoah. We are indeed grateful for your time speaking to us here on Business Live. We are pausing for a breather. I'll be right back with the Joy Business Band.